Hello, hello, and welcome to my Sunday thought. And today, I'm doing it on Sunday. It's Easter, which I know very little about, but I'm going to be telling you some stories. And it's the last day of Passover, which I know more about, and will tell you some stories. So you're going to get some Passover and Easter stories. First of all, of course, I want to remind you, as I do every week, in the vain hope that somebody will buy this thing and I can get a cup of coffee. I have written a book. It's called Getting the Last Laugh. It's on Amazon. You can get it in the UK. You can get it anywhere on Amazon, on your Amazon. So, for example, if you live in Germany, it'll be on the Amazon in Germany. And if you live in Amsterdam, it'll be on that Amazon. But it's also the United States and here. And there is a new book out. It's called Outrageously Old and Loving It. And I don't have a copy yet, but you can see it on Facebook, and you can see it just by writing in Lynn Ruth Miller, Outrageously Old and Loving It. And that is stories about people that made their dreams come true. And they're real people, but I changed all their names so that nobody would sue me, because I'm not that dumb. Today, I'm going to tell you a Passover story, because this is the last day of Passover. Now, those of you who don't know what Passover is, it's where the Jewish people celebrate that they were thrown out of Egypt, and they have to spend 40 days in the desert, and they ate unleavened bread. So Jews the world over eat unleavened bread, and there's a ceremony, a big dinner, which is called the Seder, that they have. There are two of them the first two nights, and sometimes they have one the last night tonight as well. And they are very long meals, and they take a very long time. So my story about Passover, I have two of them. And then one of the things that you do at the Seder is you put wine out for Elijah. And then you continue. And, of course, at the end of the day, you bring it back in the house. But in the particular time that I am telling you about, because I have two Seders that were very memorable, not to mention many that were not. But these two were. And this one was when I was living in Toledo, Ohio, and we were living on Northmore Road, and my mother had her usual Seder, and usually what she does is she invites 1,000 people and insists that we can feed them all. And this time she also invited my cousin Murray, who has since left us, which is a terrible loss for all of us, and his wife Judy, and their little child Kathy. And at that time we had a dog named Junior, and Junior hated it was a wire-hair terrier who hated just about all human beings except my mother. He was an absolutely vile dog, and my mother adored him. I wish, believe me, that she had adored me half as much as she adored that damn dog. But she did. She adored Junior. When Junior died, she had a memorial in the garage, so she could pull the car up to into the garage and stop and say a silent prayer in Junior's memory with a picture of him and his dog Bulls. She adored that dog. And as I said, the dog hated everybody. So when we had a lot of people in, the dog would pretty much attack everybody. And Murray and Judy brought their little girl, Kathy, and she was all dressed up in a little white skirt or little white dress, and she looked absolutely adorable. She was about 3. And she was sitting there, and she did nothing, absolutely nothing, except look adorable when Junior charged in and bit her. And Kathy immediately began to cry. Judy picked her up to try to comfort her. He didn't break skin or anything. He just nipped her. But and my mother came in, and as is typical of my mother, who could not believe the dog did anything wrong, she said to Judy, she said, "What did Kathy do to the dog?" And of course, the child had done nothing. So my mother, in deference to the fact that the dog was biting everyone, and she wanted the Seder to be a happy Seder, she put Junior outside in the front yard. It was in the backyard, which was fenced in. Yeah, that was right. No. There was a side. I'm telling you different because I remember I've lived in so many houses. There was a side area that was all fenced in, and she sent him out in there to bark and drive the neighbors crazy. But as I said, one of the things we do for the Seder is we put wine out for Elijah. And this time my mother put the wine out, not paying any attention. She put it out where the dog was, and the dog drank the wine. And the dog was absolutely roaring drunk. She brought him in. He was absolutely roaring drunk. And my mother was so excited because we had a Seder, probably the only Seder in the world, where Elijah had come, because my mother would not accept that the dog had drunk the wine. But the other Seder story I'm telling you is that I went to a Seder. Well, I'll tell you about how Jews are very careful to observe the rules of the Passover, and to eat only unleavened bread, and to eat on dishes that have never been sullied by wheat, and eat the traditional dishes. And we had a rabbi, and you change your dishes for Passover. You change all your dishes. If you live in a Jewish neighborhood, you will see that the people clean out their houses, and there will be lots and lots of trash the week before Passover, because people are cleaning out their houses. They're taking all the bread out and all the wheat products, and they're also, while they're doing it, they're cleaning everything else out. They're cleaning their cupboards, and they're cleaning their closets. So this rabbi's name was Rabbi Katz, and he was the Orthodox rabbi in Toledo, Ohio, and he was a darling, and anybody that's watching this will tell you he was an absolutely precious man. He made the clergy look beautiful. He just was a lovely man. And he used to change his teeth. He had false teeth, and he changed his teeth for Passover because he didn't want the teeth that he was chewing with in the 8 days of Passover to have any trace of wheat. And I said to him, Rabbi, why didn't you change your teeth for meat and milk? Because Jews are not allowed to mix the two, and we have meals that are, we call them milkadik, which is milk and fish, and we have meals that are fleischadik, which is meat and potatoes. And the rabbi, I said to him, if you change your teeth for Passover, why didn't you change them for meat and milk? And he said to me, the rabbi, he looked at me, and he said, oh, Lenny, don't ask me questions I can't answer. But my favorite Seder story was the Jews have rabbis and they have cantors. The Jews have rabbis and they have cantor. And I went to Cantor Allman's Seder, and he was another man that was absolutely an adorably kind, loving man. There's absolutely nothing that anyone can ever say about Cantor Allman that isn't complimentary. And he had a Seder. Now, when the cantors or the rabbis have Seders, they're twice as long as when laymen have Seders. And our Seder was at least 4 hours long, so you can imagine how long this thing was. And my mother and father were on vacation, and I was staying with my Aunt Lena. And we went over there. We went over to Cantor Allman's for the Passover Seder. And they were thrilled to have us, my sister Marcia D. and I. Marcia, I was 14, and my sister was 8 years younger. And we went over there, and my Uncle Mark dropped us off, and then we proceeded to listen to an endless service. Because what they do is they read a book called the Haggadah, and this guy skipped nothing. And in between, he was singing, because he's the cantor. So he was singing. And when I came there, I was in perfect health. When I left, I had erupted when the thing was over. And they say, next year, Israel, next year, Palestine. And when they say the final thing, I erupted in German measles. I was immediately covered with pink spots. And everybody looked and said, oh, what's happened to Lenny Ruth? And what it was is the service was so long that I just erupted in German measles. But there are 2 Easter stories I have for you. One is that I never knew that Easter was a religious holiday. I had no idea that Easter was religious. And in our house, we always hid Easter eggs. We always had chocolate bunnies. And my mother, because it was spring, and we lived in Toledo, Ohio, and spring was so wanted. The winters were absolutely terrible, and usually in spring at Easter, it still was biting cold because summer doesn't come to Toledo, Ohio until May 31st, and it comes without fail May 31st, and the temperature goes up to 90 degrees Fahrenheit, which is extremely uncomfortable for all of you that are on Celsius. And we die of the heat, whereas the day before we were dying of the cold. So Easter is pretty cold. However, my mother loved hats. Now, my mother was 4'11", and my mother was beautiful, and my father was very wealthy, and he loved to dress her. And the way I have described it is he would go out with her. My father was not a handsome man. To me, he was, but he was not very good looking. And he would have my mother in these expensive clothes that he bought her, with designer dresses and shoes. She would go into Detroit to buy her shoes at Saks Fifth Avenue, and her mink coats. And she always loved. She dressed like a fashion plate, and she was 4'11". She was tiny, and high heels, like this, with platforms. And she always smelled good. God, did she smell good? It was Arpege or Shalimar or Chanel. And that's what she always dressed. But for Easter, as it was spring, she always bought a new hat, which was exorbitantly expensive, but my father didn't care. When my father went out with my mother all dressed up, he wore her like a jewel. She was his trophy wife. She was absolutely gorgeous, and she smelled like a flower garden, and nobody knew what an evil temper and what a monster she was in the house. And so she would wear these beautiful hats. And on this particular occasion that I'm remembering, we used to go to the Tally Ho restaurant, which was known for its tomato pudding. Don't ask, it had bread in it, I remember, but it was a tomato pudding. It was very famous. And we went on Easter Sunday to the Tally Ho, all of us, for dinner. And that was my sister, my father, my mother, and I. And my mother put on her new Easter bonnet. And this one was covered with flowers, absolutely covered with flowers. And it was beautiful. I still remember it. The flowers were they were artificial, of course, but they looked, oh my God, they looked real. They looked so real. And my mother, remember, is very short. So we got to the Tally Ho restaurant, and we sat around the table, and my mother is wearing this great big hat that's got every flower in the world on it. And of course, she didn't take it off. How she intended to eat with it, I will never know. But my mother liked to be the center of attention. She was very, when she went out, but she was not very loud or anything, but she liked to turn heads because she was so beautiful, and she knew it. And my father always reminded her of how beautiful she was. She knew it, and this was her ace in the hole, so to speak. And so she walked into Tally Ho with this absolutely exquisite hat, and they seated us. And what they did in those days, you always had bread on the table, and they always filled your water glass with water. But and they always had young boys, maybe 15, 16, who were busboys. And these busboys would come around, they'd fill your thing with water. But when the young man came to fill my mother's water glass with water, he thought the flowers were alive. And so he watered my mother's hat. And the water went through the hat and down her face. And as she reacted, she looked up, about to really give this guy hell for dumping water on her head, when she saw that a hush had come over all the people on Easter Sunday in the Tally Ho restaurant, and every human being was looking at my mother and her hat while the young boy watered it. Never one to lose an opportunity, my mother smiled at the man through this cascade of water, took her hat off, put it on the table, and she said, I think it might use just another little drink. And the young boy who realized what he did played along with us and said, absolutely, Mrs. Miller. And he poured water on the hat. And I remember I said to my mother, that man just ruined your hat. And that was a very expensive hat. And my mother said, no, that's perfectly all right. She said, I'll just go down to Geraldo's and buy another one tomorrow and charge it to your father. And my daddy, who thought my mother was a goddess, absolutely honey dear. Honey dear is what he called her. So that's one Easter story. And your second Easter story, and this is going to be the end of this thing, is, remember, I did not know that Easter was a holiday. It was a religious holiday, which I cannot understand because I went to college where they had the masses, the beautiful masses, and I should have put two and two together. But having a mother who had her hat watered on Easter, you can imagine how stupid and how innocent I was. I still believed the babies came out of belly buttons, so I had absolutely no idea that Easter was religious. I knew it had things to do with bunnies and coloring eggs and my mother's hats. I knew that, but that was all I knew. So we now flash ahead to when I am in my 40s. And I decided it was about time I learned to ride a bicycle. And everybody who listens to my comedy knows I couldn't ride a bicycle. I kept falling off the bicycle. I couldn't ride the bicycle. So when I was 40, I decided, okay, I'm going to learn. I'm going to learn how to ride a bicycle. I got myself no gears, no speeds, just a regular bicycle. And because I was living in a trailer park at that time, and yes, I was trailer trash, and yes, my mother didn't like to come out to see me because she felt it demeaned her. But I was living in a trailer park, and by the way, I loved it. And I would practice riding a bicycle with the children because I love children, and I would ride around the trailer court with the bicycle and the children. And the children were anywhere from 7 or 8 to maybe 10, because I think Tammy went with me. She was 10. And a little girl named Robin was 8. Michelle was 7. There was a little boy named, I think, Billy, who gave me my dog. He would ride with us. So we rode around the trailer court. And, of course, all the mothers thought I was taking care of them. But the truth was the children were taking care of me. This was when I was 40, and I was recovering from the year-long illness that I had. And this is on Good Friday. We're driving bicycles. And by that time, I figured out that Easter was religious, but I didn't understand what it was. I didn't understand what was Good Friday about. What was all this about? So I'm riding the bicycle, and I turned to Robin, who was 8 years old, and I said, Robin, I know that Easter is religious, but I'm trying to figure what happened with Jesus. I know that Jesus died on Friday. That's today. This is Good Friday. But when did he come back? And Robin, who was 8 years old, looked at me, and she said, you know, Miss Miller, she said, I'm not sure, but I think it was Halloween. And that's my Easter story. I want to thank you so much for joining me for my Sunday Thought, which I did on time. Let's hope I keep up the tradition. You've got a new book. If you go on Amazon, you'll see it. It's called Growing Old Outrageously. And it's cheaper than this. But it's a very small book. I think it's 91 pages. Lots of pictures and lots of true stories about people that made their dreams come true. And if you want to read about me making my dream come true so I can actually afford a latte, which I would love, please do so. It's getting the last laugh. And happy Easter, happy Pesach, and thank you so much for joining me.